Hello, and welcome back to our Arcurus Plays Arma 3 Laws of War DLC. So, I'm going to go ahead and start in on the next mission, and hopefully it'll raise some more good discussion points.
I got a leaflet here. The army must have scattered thousands of these.
Propaganda.
Something like that. This one says, there's still time to surrender. Maybe a bad choice of words, considering.
Time to surrender? What's the context here?
Well, this was last year, September. These leaflets, they were dropped maybe a day before the fighting began. You see, the guerrillas there, they'd found themselves a new leader. Charismatic, ex-military. For him, this was no time to surrender. Far from it.
That's
in fact, he used
Stavro
that time to
from the
rally his
campaign.
people. Encourage them to resist, build defenses. Meanwhile, the army was setting up for a major offensive. The attack on Oreo Castro? It was no secret. Of course, after the leaflet drop, IDAP started to pull out of the town. So the little I do know, well, that brings us back to the brother. The one who disappeared.
You know what? This is cool. And the way this is programmed is that,
His name was Alexis. He'd volunteered to build a barricade. Town was his home, after all.
Anyways, what is on these leaflets can be changed depending on, like, a, PNG in the mission file. So, you can actually, make, like, whatever your own leaflets are that you can drop. Oh, here's one that stuck around.
So, these leaflets, they were a warning to the town.
Yeah, they confirmed the offensive.
The government was concerned about civilian casualties.
Don't sound too surprised.
So, NATO's message, do you think it was getting through? I mean, according to the laws of armed conflict, that's the principle of precaution, right?
Sure, maybe. Or maybe they were just sick of all the extra paperwork.
Cease resistance. Further acts of aggression against Altis armed forces will be the death of you. Yeah, that is not a good, how would I put it? That is, if you want to try and get, like, you know, a local resistance to stop fighting you, especially if you are basically of the same nationality, that is a really, really poor message to send. To be honest, a message of, you know, brotherhood and togetherness, you know, would probably be more effective in getting some of the people who aren't as hard chargers to stand down. Alright, so we're going to be building a barricade here with vehicles. Which, barricades have stood the test of time as defensive
If I understand it,
structures.
you know about what happened through the brother. Alexis, was it? Did you meet him?
Not directly, but, you know, it's a small town, right? People knew Alexis. After what happened here, I talked to the locals. Found out what I could. The rest of what I know is pieced together from the commission report itself.
Actually, that incident report, the evidence you submitted, that's partly why I asked for the interview. I want to gain a human perspective.
Well, that's understandable. I mean, for a humanitarian commission, those reports tend to be,
A little detached, yes.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Just, I was thinking, he even took a local priest's car. I remember I was talking to Father Georgiopoulos, and he was actually very good about the whole thing.
How so?
Something about rich men and camels.
Help me out with some context here. This barricade.
I mean, it was crude, right? A gap between two outcrops of rock, natural bottleneck. The guerrillas hoped to block the road by jamming it with vehicles. As for the vehicles in the barricade, the commission actually linked the plates to a number of locals. Of course, several were still missing after the incident, so the investigation made some assumptions.
Alright, so building barricades is basically a time-honored tradition of defense. So, I mean, these defensive positions aren't so great, but
By that point, the guerrillas were short on vehicles. Hey, just a thought, you remember the earthquakes back then?
Yes, they were quite frequent. Were IDAP at all concerned about that?
Oh yeah. Any kind of disaster relief on top of what we were dealing with, it would have just about finished us off completely.
I just realized my character is a weapon.
Stop me if this is a delicate topic, but I'd like to press you for more information on the executions.
No, I mean, you're investigating war crimes. I'll tell you what I can.
Okay. How many were killed?
9.
And, in your opinion, what did this violence achieve?
Nothing. All that, I don't know if it served any purpose.
Ooh. Executions in a war setting is that's bad. But anyways, I keep trying to talk about barricades. So a barricade's main purpose isn't to stop the enemy completely. It is usually to slow them down, force them to go around it, usually into areas that you've already cleared for fire, which seems to be what they've done here with their own vehicles, or with this vehicle here. So it forces the enemy to come around these places wherever they can, and, you know, into the waiting guns.
So, just to clarify, in your email you said you served as a combat engineer, the Marine Corps?
That's right. South Zagoria, generous.
Then it's fair to say you're no stranger to the subject of my article, the laws of armed conflict.
I've seen a few things, heard stories. It's rarely been, you know, clear-cut, right and wrong.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's so important to gain your perspective. You've seen things from both sides. I mean, now as an NGO, too.
Sure, yeah.
So, Generous and South Zagoria are actually, those are references to Arma 1 and 2, actually. And in Armas 1 and 2, you generally play members of the U.S. Marine Corps. And so that kind of brings this character
Do you think Alexis,
in line with that.
I don't know, thought twice about taking these vehicles?
Look, sure, these were his neighbors, but this was their home, and it was under attack. What would you do?
Yep. So, probably in Alexis's mind, it wasn't about, like, he wasn't stealing vehicles, per se. He was just, you know, using, you know, everyone was basically pitching in to help with the defense. Gotta find one more car. Should be one straight down here. I will say there are a bunch of possibly like triggerable lines in some of these missions, and I'm not even sure if I'm getting all of them. Target practice. Ah, here's another car. Alright, so yeah, speaking of barriers again, the point of concertina wire, which is what this is, or razor wire, or even barbed wire, it's to either slow down an enemy advance through an area, or to force them to go around to somewhere else. And then you have more hard cover, like this overturned car here. Like this stuff here is trying to provide hard cover. This is actually a really, really good position for this machine gun.
Another strong point in the town was on a ridge line above the road. The guerrillas had overturned a car, stationed a heavy machine gun up there.
Yeah. So basically they could watch this entire approach road with heavy machine gun, which is good to do. Part of the preparation that I might have made for this probably would have involved cutting down some of those trees and staging them along the road, this wall. You know, if you're going to do it. Got an observation post. I would put him somewhere a little bit less conspicuous, though. But he also can watch the approaching roads, as well as like these big open fields. So it isn't like these guerrillas are making major mistakes in their defenses.
Alexis knew the town well, of course.
These vehicles, I suppose all of them were taken without consent.
Well, yeah, given the circumstances. The owners couldn't exactly refuse.
Right, but that's the thing. Never mind theft being illegal, the laws of armed conflict prohibit such actions.
They prohibit, but prohibition does not actually stop anyone. Because when you're a lot of guerrillas, real world and in Arma, you'll notice that whereas a lot of them do look military, there's no real common like uniform marking between them. So like mark who they are or to mark who they are or what faction they belong to. That in and of itself is a violation of the international laws of war, because it helps positive identification of combatants versus non-combatants. And guerrillas, by their nature, are, illegal when it comes to the laws of war. Like, by their nature, they break the laws of war, so I wouldn't really expect them to follow many, if any, of any of the other rules, because they break one of the most basic one, which does allow them to hide amongst the populace, ditch the weapon, ditch attack vests, and, like this guy, ditch the boonie hat, ditch the vest, ditch the weapon, and then he just blends in. Same with this guy here. Ditch the vest, ditch the weapon. I wonder if they'll say anything about Stavro here. No? Not going to mention about Mr. Stavro? Okay. But that's another thing that I don't think they really take note of, that it's impossible under certain circumstances to tell who's a member of the FIA versus who's a member of the Altis Armed Forces. Because even Stavro is wearing camouflage taken from the AAF. Oh, did that move the van out of the barricaded cars? Yeah, it did. Oh, I hate that I can't see. What the heck? I am really pushing all these vehicles, like, way out of the way. Test. Build barricaded cars. Come on, is this barricade not good enough? This is what I get for trying to be fancy with it. There we go.
After Alexis built the barricade, what then? Did he stay inside the town?
No, that's where the story gets more complicated. The barricade itself was later chained up and set on fire by someone else. I don't know quite who. Alexis, he headed west to lay mines. Anti-tank mines were already in the ground. If there's no pull fuse, and so long as they've not been stacked, they aren't too hard to remove. But Alexis, although he didn't use anti-handling devices, he did create a hybrid minefield.
AT mines. Mixed with APs?
That's it, yeah. He put anti-personnel mines around the anti-tank ones, made clearance all that much harder.
Alright. So one would kind of think that this might be like, this is a smart move. However, it's really not, because no one's going to stop and clear mines while they are under fire.
How did they get hold of them?
They got them when the government's outposts fell into guerrilla hands. Bounding mines. The type that leaps up a meter into the air before exploding. Nasty stuff. Hell, nowadays they're even made with plastic casing to throw off older types of mine detector.
Lovely.
Oh yeah, just do yourself a favor. Don't look up Bouncing Betty injuries online.
What's weird is that's already an AP mine right there. So, when I was in the army,
They're still there?
Mm-hmm. And not for long. We're setting up our demining drones as we speak.
We don't bother to create complex minefields like this, because the way the U.S. military uses mines as in a deterrent role more than in a defensive role. And there's a very different methodology and thought process when it comes to that. Oh my god, I do not want to be around mines during... Yeah.
You know, thinking about it, even if we had a record of where Alexis's mines were, it may not do much good.
No? I thought minefield maps were a key part of your work.
Most folks don't realize, but landmines, they don't stay put. Heavy rain, landslides, keeping a map current ain't so simple. And with all the earthquakes in this region, there's little chance they'd all be in the same place. I don't know, maybe just gallows humor, but we've got an expression for that. Landmines have legs. Alexis proved to be quite the combat engineer. He placed the mines exactly as he'd been shown.
So, moving on, where did Alexis go next?
He took a quad bike up to the castle behind the town.
So yeah, we don't bother placing minefields like this because due to the way the United States at least adheres to laws of war, is we do place our landmines in a way that is quite obvious for the most part, and they are marked. So like that anti-tank mine, it wouldn't be mostly flush with the ground, it would be up on that asphalt. So anybody coming down the road would see it. They'd have to stop, evaluate their surroundings, and then try to find a way around. And then if they came under fire from the town, you basically have created an imaginary barrier, because if they find one landmine, they have to assume that there are more. And you can funnel the enemies, so if they came up this road, found these mines, they'd have to try to go through, you know, these open fields here to try to push up towards the town, which might lead them into more landmines. So it creates quite the quandary for the attacking force. Because nobody is going to stop and try to, disarm these mines. They might send a vehicle, like earlier on in the last episode, or in one of the earlier episodes where they had the Bobcat vehicle, just go up the road and trigger all the anti-personnel mines. That is a solution. One of the most armored pieces of equipment at our disposal when we were in Iraq was what we call a D9 dozer, and it's basically a heavily armored bulldozer that you just roll up the town, you roll forward with. Then there's another vehicle which is built to be basically, if you have one, you carry enough spare parts that you could build another, and it's really heavily armored, and you just drive it through like IEDs. Typically it's like a lead vehicle, so if there's an IED on the road, it hits it first. You engage like whatever spotters are, you fix the vehicle with all the spare parts you have, or you scrap it and then continue on.
The castle? Why?
He was needed at the Guerrilla's base camp.
Okay. His group were running things from up at the castle.
Mm-hmm. And I see what you're getting at. Yeah, Geneva Convention's cultural objects, I think.
So, there are multiple ways to deal with landmines, whether they're hidden or out there, but like burying landmines or hiding them or camouflaging them was basically highly discouraged in at least the unit that I was part of.
The barricade. There wasn't any way around it then?
From the road? No, well, not unless you cut through the compound.
Another reason why I really enjoy, recording this series is because for a lot of this stuff, as I said before, I was a combat engineer, whereas I wouldn't call myself a subject matter expert anymore.
Maybe a technical question.
Go ahead.
In these situations, do those involved commonly record the locations of minefields?
That's a tough one. Take this situation, for example. I'm convinced Alexis would have made a record. It's his home, after all. But do we have access to that information? No. And that's the problem. Things, information, people, landmines, they get lost in the fog of war. But that's the thing about landmines. Lost or not, they stick around. They wait to be found.
Yep. And whereas I don't consider myself a subject matter expert anymore, I've been out of the military for 10 years now. 8 to 10 years. So a lot has probably changed since I was last current. But a lot of the theory of it is still applicable. And I can at least talk in confidence about that sort of stuff. Good angle grinder there. And yeah, another part of the, you mentioned it as part of like, law of war, but cultural objects. So like, basically, anything that you could be considered like an archaeological site, museums, that sort of thing, like all that stuff, even like major landmarks, all that stuff is considered to be, like cultural heritage type stuff. And, that stuff is protected under law of war because what is really tragic, and I also like, I'm also a history buff. I really like history, from like ancient history, medieval history, that sort of thing. Like, I really like that stuff. But oftentimes, like, when wars happen, it doesn't matter what side you're on. The United States, the Allies, we're all guilty of this, of destroying, like, cultural objects, artifacts, archaeological artifacts, like, stuff intrinsic to understanding our past. We have just destroyed in war. I forget if it was in Iraq or the Gulf War or both. They stationed like anti-aircraft guns on the top of a museum in an attempt, in the belief that because the museum was a cultural object, that we would not bomb it to destroy the anti-aircraft guns. Well, were they wrong? U.S. commanders decided, and without punishment, I will go on to say, that they decided that the safety of the aircraft and the importance of the mission was worth more than the artifacts in that museum. So they went ahead and bombed those anti-aircraft guns on the roof of the museum, destroying priceless archaeological artifacts. Allied bombings of Germany in World War II, some of the best. I was watching Mini Minuteman's video on bog bodies, and he reminded me that, when we like firebombed German cities, we destroyed some of the most well-preserved, like some of those well-preserved early human bodies that we had, that were on display in the museums there. And on and on and on this list goes, and it goes all the way back to like it goes all the way back to like the sacking of like Baghdad in ancient times, because there used to be like a great library there, the Great Library at Carthage. Like all of that knowledge, all of it just destroyed when those cities were sacked due to war. So even though it's, protecting cultural artifacts is a big part of like the modern rule of war. We've seen that time and time again. It's just
Do you
ignored.
feel these preparations made a difference?
In the short term, I do, yeah. The barricade held. The government's tanks were knocked out on the road.
And in the long term?
I'd go on, but as you may have heard, it's getting kind of loud here.
By the sounds of it, you've got your hands full.
This will only take a minute. Be right back.
Bet you wish we had one of those in Pakistan, huh?
I gotta admit, that's 60 tons of getting shit done.
But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna kind of hit the escape key here to have a bit of quiet. Like, yeah, like time and time and time again, the destruction or defacement of, you know, of basically humanity's past and history, things that could help us answer questions about ourselves and where we come from, just destroyed by humanity's own self-destructive impulses, by people making short-sighted decisions on the tactical and strategic level. Because when it came right down to it, you know, the fire bombings of Germany, like this, or the strategic bombing of Germany, that did not affect the German war machine in any of the ways that the proponents of strategic bombing would have thought. So it was a waste of the lives of like the aviators on both sides, countless civilian lives. Just a waste. And then another thing that's like really like personal to me, I was stationed just outside Mosul when I was in Iraq, and very close to or on our fob was one of the oldest churches in the country. Like, it was something like, you know, it was something like over 1,000 years old. Something like that. 1,000, 1,200 years old, I forget. But we weren't allowed to go there because earlier on in the invasion, the 101st Airborne went in there and spray painted their logo all over all the walls. And apparently that's a common thing, and like that makes me sad and angry, and I'm sitting here like tearing up like thinking about it. So anyways, I think I've ranted enough about that. So I'm gonna, you know, end the episode here, cool off a little bit, and then we will be back for the next episode. Thank you for watching. This is Arcurus, signing off.